welcome to the next in our short series of video interviews with our HR Director Readership, where I ask what's next post-COVID-19. So joining me today is Joe Mosley, who is the HR Director of the Salvation Army. So good morning, Joe.
Morning, Peter.
And where are you based today? In a lovely setting.
Yeah, so I'm down in Dorset, just by the seafront down here in Muddyford Quay. So I'm very fortunate to be in lockdown here. And I'm in the shed at the end of the garden, so I'm also far enough away from kids and the chaos. And yeah, I escape here, which is great.
That's a lovely shed. It's a lovely shed. We're all jealous. Joe, I think very quickly, if you just to let everyone know a little bit more about you, if you can just give us a flavour of, your role with the Salvation Army, etc., and your sort of overall responsibilities.
Yeah, so I've been HR Director of the Salvation Army for 3 years now. And Salvation Army has a workforce of around 4,500 employees, with the second largest social care provider in the UK. So lots of frontline services, care homes, hostels, anti-human trafficking and modern slavery services, addiction, children's, older people, everything you can imagine. So those 4,500 employees have a broad remit of over 600 different roles. So a really, really diverse workforce. And we're also a church as well as a charity. So we have, in addition, about 1,500 officers who are our ministers of the church, who are out there running our churches, or which we call core, across the UK. So yeah, and obviously at the moment a busier time for us than ever before, unprecedented with the demand for our services at such a difficult time for people.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, that tells us a little bit more about you. So let's kick off really with our sort of first question. So this is COVID-19 coming through the crisis and preparing for a better future. So really, what are your present key concerns and challenges for your employees and your volunteers and your organisation at the moment?
Yeah, so it's been a tremendously busy time. Obviously, we've been impacted very badly by COVID within our care homes, within our hostel settings, within our safe houses, and a lot of pressure on our frontline staff. And also some of our staff themselves have had to shield or self-isolate. We've had illness within them that we've had to cover. So just trying to keep all those services up and running has been first and foremost. On top of that, we've been negatively affected with our fundraised income. So we've had to think very, very carefully about what we can keep running at this time. So we've furloughed about 1,200 of our staff in order to divert funds to the front line where it's most needed. And then we've got a huge proportion of staff who are now suddenly working from home. So for me, one of the big challenges has been we've got such different employee groups at the moment. We've got people working all hours in terribly difficult situations who are witnessing terrible trauma firsthand. We've got people who are furloughed, who themselves are feeling quite disconnected, coping with a drop in salary and income, and worried about the future. And then we've got people suddenly working from home, and not everybody's home circumstances is positive. So we have people who find it very difficult, working on the edge of a kitchen table or in their bedroom, people in shared housing, in small flats, for whom it's been a very difficult situation. And yet we've got others who are absolutely flourishing with the opportunity to work from home and are finding their productivity has increased, they're more in touch with their families. So I think one of the difficulties for me has been the fact that everyone's having such a different experience. So although this is affecting the whole country, as our employees are having such varied experiences, and how do we support all of them within those varied experiences going on at the moment. The other thing for me is actually the trauma, as I mentioned earlier, that some of our frontline staff are witnessing. How do we support them longer term? The deaths in care homes has obviously been well publicised now, but in the early days it wasn't. And what they were experiencing and going through is incredibly traumatic. and you know, losing people who they'd been caring for a number of years, had really positive relationships with, knew the family, you know, incredibly hard for our staff to be dealing with. So much to think about going forward as well, about how we support them in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, it struck me with your first charity I was actually spoken to, and certainly in terms of what you do, and as you say, the very different essence of your employees and your volunteers and what they do, and yeah, I can imagine that is some challenge to kind of try and do the right thing for everyone, I guess.
Absolutely, and you know, we've been very conscious as well that so trying to get resources out. Our food banks are absolutely inundated, as you can imagine, and that's going to be a longer term thing. You know, we have to think in a different way. So temporary food banks that we've set up, in addition to our normal food bank provision, you know, as we come out of furlough and as redundancies increase across the UK, we're going to have to think about that longer term provision. And so it's really looking at, you know, where are we needed most and how we divert people and resources to those places.
Okay, Joe. All right. So let's look at question number two then, really, which is more about, I guess, preparing for the staged return. So it's obviously it's almost the timeline, and it's all about what measures have you implemented, you know, or are you to keep people safe and productive?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's not just the physical safety, it's the emotional safety and well-being. And we're very aware of people suddenly being very isolated, either through furlough or working from home. So as well as thinking about physical workplace, we need to think about those who are still working or furloughed and aren't physically within the workplace. We've just issued a survey of all our employees, those who are frontline, furloughed and working from home, to try and understand what their fears may be about returning to the workplace and what the barriers are to them working effectively currently. And we're going to do a lot of work with the results of that survey to better look at how we triage staff coming back in the longer term, so we can look much more individually at people's circumstances. We've obviously put in place risk assessments, and that's had to be very varied. We have so many different settings, from care homes that have never stopped operating to charity shops that we're starting to reopen now, to, you know, our provision across the UK of various services. So it's had to be very individual and look at the circumstances locally. We're still following government guidance that if you can work from home, you should. And that we're being very cautious in the reopening of provision. And we've also done additional individual assessments of people who may be affected through either underlying health conditions, but also taking into account people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds where they may be more at risk, and how we can try and look at safeguards in place there. So we're trying to have quite an individual approach to that. We've also been doing a lot of upskilling of managers. We've got a toolkit around managing through COVID, where people can look at return to work interviews, so we can really understand, for those people who are fearful to return to the workplace, you know, what's underlying that and what can we do to support that and make them as safe as possible. We know people are going to have ongoing caring responsibilities, care provision, whether that's schools or for other people who they're caring for within their household. It's not going to be as straightforward as it is right now. So how do we look at maximising the use of furlough where we can for people to try and make re-entry more gradual? And you know, we're really conscious as well that we need to have a voice for employers. So not only for employees, not only looking at things like our surveys, but we've put new health and safety reps in place across all of our services, so there's a voice through that in addition to our normal employee forum. So just trying to listen as much as we can, and trying to be as individual as we can as to people's concerns and their experiences. As I said earlier, everyone's experience has been so different, and I think we've just got to take that into account as we start to reopen. But it's also been a really good opportunity for us to look at how we utilise our buildings and services. You know, do we need 450 people in our head office each day in the middle of London? How, you know, what are the things that have been really positive to come out of this that we can actually build on moving forward? So I don't want us to lose and fail to capture all of those new ways of working that people have been able to maximise during the crisis. How do we take some of that learning forward? So, that's a really positive opportunity for us as well.
We'll come on to that. Yes, coming on nicely to my third question there. But yeah, just struck by I guess as you rightly say, because you've got the the retail shop side to open back up, which is very, very different, and then you've got transport and public, and then anxiety around that piece, and then you've got people in office sort of based scenarios, I guess, and then you've also got people on the front line in care homes or abroad and stuff like that. So that's such a difficult mix that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, it's been how are we, it's very difficult to send something out to everybody about working from home when you've got people in our care homes and hostels who have never not been in the front line. So we've had to be really careful with our communication because everyone's experience has been so different, and the incredible work people have done on the front line, really valuing that, but then not making people who have been furloughed through no fault of their own feel disenfranchised and disengaged. And so it's been a really, really difficult and sensitive time to deal with all of those different messages. And making sure everybody feels valued and supported, no matter what role they've played during the crisis.
What sort of strategies, just on the engagement piece then, Jo? Is there certain things that you've been able to do to keep everyone engaged, whether they're furloughed or not, in the whole organisation?
Yeah, so we've really upped communication. I think it's been a really positive thing during this time, and also quite targeted communication. So we're really keen to make sure that continues, because that's actually been a real positive, and we've had very positive feedback around that. Just looking at my own team, as a HR team, obviously they've been under huge pressure, working very, very long hours, and also gone from, quite a lot of our teams worked very socially in offices. I think within HR, you generally have a lot of people, person who want to have that physical contact. So that's been so different for them. But we've made sure they have lots of team meetings for their individual sections, but we have a whole directorate town hall every Thursday, which, as well as trying to keep people informed of changes and decisions, we also always try and do a sort of social and fun element to that. So we've had all sorts of, wear a hat day, bring your favourite mug, whatever we can think of. We're getting a bit thin on the ground after a few months, believe me. But we try and do something that engages people, and quizzes and all sorts of things to try and keep them engaged. We also have a brilliant one of our business partners who does a at your desk keep fit session for sort of 10 or 15 minutes during the town hall, which causes a lot of hilarity. So we've just been trying to, and I think that's replicated across the organisation, trying to find different ways of keeping people engaged, not just from a work point of view, but that social contact. And that's been really important for those people who live alone, who are finding this whole experience incredibly isolating. So how do we keep, the momentum up and make sure they still have that contact with their teammates? And actually, in some ways, it's been even more beneficial because we have 30 odd people who work within the HR team at head office, and then we've got 8 regional teams. But actually, they all come together every Thursday now. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Liverpool or Aberdeen or Devon or the middle of London. Everybody's joining together. So that's been really positive from my point of view, that there's been a lot of collaboration that maybe wouldn't have happened so easily before, or just happened a few times a year when we got the whole team together. So there's been some real positives around that.
Yeah, I mean, lots of stories with technology as an enabler, and we do a similar thing on a Friday. We all get together, and we've had the hat thing, and as you say, but after a while, it can be tough to come up with something new, but it's good. But much as there's some tragedy, humour is such a big part of this to try to keep our spirits up, isn't it? So, okay, good. Well, let's move on to question 3 then, which you sort of started to allude to a little bit before, which is really, as you say, rightly say, the learning. And this is what I really am kind of delving into this really heavily, because I think this is the key part of all of this for us. So from the learning from the crisis and the journey and the destination for your organization, I'm keen to see if that's changed, and and really how this is impacting on sort of you, your HR function, your employees, and also your organisation.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'd already, we were on a real journey to try and make the organisation much more flexible and agile. I'm a huge advocate for agile working. I just believe from an inclusion point of view, it offers so many more opportunities for our workforce. So we've been working very hard with our senior team to get approval of our agile policy, which is flexible working and beyond. So, you know, a whole different approach to how we work and where people work. It had been quite hard to get full agreement, but actually we went back to board. It was already scheduled to go back to board the week we went into lockdown, and was approved because clearly it was already happening. So we'd already got the workforce working an agile way, whether we wanted to or not. So that was brilliant. And we've actually seen people really change their mind about being able to work from home. I think we had a lot of people who were skeptical, who felt people working from home wouldn't be working, that thought that unless you could see people in front of me, you can't manage them effectively. And I've seen such a turnaround from people who were, the biggest advocates of not moving from a very much office-based culture, saying, actually, this is working really well. I didn't think it would, and seeing higher levels of productivity. Now, that has to be balanced with the fact that this has all taken place at a time where it's sort of extreme home working. This is never the way flexibility would be in a normal environment. There's no opportunity to have a blend of coming into the office and being at home. If you get sick of your environment, you couldn't nip to the local cafe and work down there for a couple of hours, or there's just been no opportunity to trial it in a way that would meet everybody's requirements. And on top of that, we've had people who are already completely isolated through lockdown, who are further isolated from their work colleagues. So this isn't a normal environment to test a more agile approach. However, despite all of that, the positives have really come out. And I think it's building on that now, not losing it, not just going back to the way we worked before, but actually saying what are the positives. So one of the things that I feel has really come out during this time is this whole managing to outcomes, which is such an important thing to be happening anyway. But obviously when you haven't got people in front of you, you're having to work in that way. And actually, we've seen a greater degree of collaboration, a breaking down of silos, because we've had very, very specific outcomes that we've had to achieve very quickly in order to provide the services that we do at this time. And people have just had to come around and make that happen. It doesn't matter what team you're in, department, what grade you are, it's just getting the people that need to make it happen coming together. And if we can build on that going forward, that would be fantastic. I think as well, because of the fact that people's whole self has been brought into the workplace, we've all had experiences on Zoom where the kids are trying to get in and the dog's barking and, but actually that's a great thing. For me, I've long been an advocate of actually being really honest and open and transparent about your whole life. And as a mum of 6, I've always been like, there is other things going on in my life and I need to be really honest about that. Now everybody's having to be honest because the kids are there screaming, you can't ignore there's things going on. So I think it's been a real opportunity to show whole people, and insight into people's lives, and that's helped with those conversations, which is great. On the flip side of that, I think, we know from surveys that have happened that a lot more women have taken on the caring responsibilities and homeschooling than men during this time. Women have been disproportionately affected by those responsibilities. And what I don't want to happen is that we come out of this time having actually taken a step back for gender equality. We need to actually be looking at what we do moving forward. One of the things I'm just looking at the moment is an quality impact assessment around furlough and who has been most affected, and making sure that doesn't carry forward as we go into a sort of post-COVID world in the future. So there's some real positives and there's real opportunities, but I think there's things we need to be really mindful of this at this time. So I think the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, is, I've really seen communication had to improve, and quick decision making and getting information out to people. I wouldn't want to lose that going forward. I think that's been a really great way of us working and coming together. We've brought teams together. We have a sort of gold and silver team around COVID to make those decisions, and I think that sort of speed of decision making and putting things into practice, we don't want to lose. And I think the other thing for me as well is that if we can have a more open outlook around where people work and whether they need to be in an office, it just opens up talent for us. So we've always really struggled to get people into our head office in London. We're fighting and competing with the whole of the London workforce, and obviously we can't pay the same amounts as our corporate colleagues can. But now we can actually open that up. If we can look at a more flexible approach to working, we can look at talent across the UK, and also we can look at people who wouldn't want to come into an office on a daily basis, but actually are incredibly skilled. So whether that's because of caring responsibilities, disability, whatever the reason, it just opens up the doors to a huge talent pool that we can really benefit from.
Some really nice piece. I think the gender, not thought about that, and that's the first time someone's mentioned it. I think that's a really important one, actually, because you're absolutely right in terms of that parenting. Everyone kind of thinks of the stresses of having kids at home, which is difficult at the moment, and home education. But no, I hadn't thought of that. So that's I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. So I'd be interested to see what your studies, what your numbers, what your impact is actually at the end of that. I'd like to hear about that. Just from a point of view of looking at the Visitors Salvation Army, bearing in mind you cover quite a few different areas, and it's such a critical sort of requirement for your sort of services, really. How do you see that changing? Is there any sort of, I know it's early to say, but with the COVID, how is that impacting as a destination in terms of where you're looking to the future?
Yeah, so I mean, as with the whole of the charity sector, fundraised income has been massively affected. There's been huge support for what we've been doing as our response to COVID, which has been great. But generally, obviously, income has gone down across the whole sector. Our charity shops have been closed. We've lost a lot of income through that. And it's, a very, very difficult time for the whole sector. Where I think we need to be going forward, and I would say that across all of the major charities, is really, really looking at our core purpose. What is it that we, uniquely do and deliver? And that's where we've really got to divert our resources right now. Where are we making the biggest impact? And the great thing about, I think suddenly people being at home, the things that just happen in an office or the things that happen in the background, you can start to review and go, actually, is that required? Do you know what I mean? There's things that, are those procedures needed? We've suddenly cut through a huge amount of red tape across the sector, and I'm sure within HR as well, things that we physically wanted in paper, well, you can't get somebody to sign right now. We're looking at it in a different way, and going forward, I think our charity, like any other, needs to really take a good, long, hard look at what is it we are essentially there to provide, and what are the things that actually we don't need to divert our income to. So I think that can be a very positive thing. On the flip side of that, I know that our services are more and more and more in demand, and we're looking at entering into a recession. We support the people who are hardest hit already. That's going to be absolutely exacerbated. So we know there's going to be incredibly demand on our services. And I almost feel in some areas it's a lull before a storm, because furlough is extended for some period of work. But obviously there will be mass redundancy, as we're already seeing across the UK. And we really need to be looking forward now about how we support people who are going to be hardest hit during all of this. So it is going to be a difficult time. Income is down. As we enter a recession, fundraised income will decrease. People won't be able to afford to give to charities. So how do we ensure that we can be there for the people we vitally need to be supporting?
No, I totally get that completely. And as you rightly say, we are seeing, that unfortunate redundancy piece come in now, which is going to happen. We just got to do it in the right way, and as you say, support people around it. And I love this piece about collaboration with, there's lots of sharing of getting those jobs out there. People who've been let go, put them onto other companies. I really like that. Okay, and finally then, Joe, more as a personal one for you then. So in this, I guess, historical time really in terms of COVID-19, never seen anything like it. How are you coping? What's it like for you to be an HR director at a time like this? Just give us your thoughts.
Yeah, so when everything first happened, it's been the busiest time, my professional career. And very, very long hours, very little sleep for quite a few weeks for me and the team, which, to be fair, has continued. Every time we think we've started to get a hold of things, there's been something new, whether it's flexible furlough or whatever else we're having to react to constantly. So it's been an incredibly busy time, but for me, I've seen HR absolutely come into its own. I've seen it centre stage in every decision making, and that's across every sort of sector. I've seen a great collaboration amongst HR directors and HR colleagues. There's various groups that I belong to that we come together, sort of an evening a week, and we share experiences from a variety of sectors, but we're all facing the same issues. And I've seen a real generosity of spirit of us, we've developed this, do you want it? I can do this. And, that has been fantastic to see. So as a profession, I think it's been a great opportunity to show the value of HR. I think we've never been busier as a profession, but there's been some real positives. And I think certainly for those organisations where HR may not be represented in the boardroom, they've suddenly had to make sure that HR is there and supporting decisions. So I think that's been a real positive for the profession. I've seen people absolutely excel during this time. Some of the dedication of my team across the UK has just been unbelievable, unprecedented, and that's been amazing to see. And I think the value of that moving forward, that we are entering into what will be a difficult time in the longer term, and people are becoming more tired, and there was a lot of adrenaline to begin with. So I think we've just got to make sure that we keep people knowing how valued they are, and how critical they've been to this process. For me, going forward, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to really look differently about people resource within organisations, and how we utilise our people, and it being about what people contribute and the outcomes, not about you need to be in this destination for this meeting for so many hours a day. Actually, do you, why do you need to do it in that way? Is there a different way of doing things? Is it, almost everything's been thrown up into the air, and we can just look at how it lands now and sort of really build on that. And a real opportunity to, this has brought to the fore that everybody's individual circumstances and experiences is different. And I think a much more individual way of managing and supporting people going forward. So some massive opportunities, but also I think a note of caution that, there's also the potential of this becoming much more difficult for people who are in the lowest pay brackets, who are, affected through caring, through gender. We've got to ensure that we don't actually move back as a society as a result of this, that we make sure we keep that inclusive workforce moving forward.
Yeah, totally agree. And we can only cling on to the positives. And as you say, we're used to working with the known. This is very much the unknown. And I get that piece about the continual learning. So it's hard work getting through this, but we will get through it. And as you say, tough times to come. But, look, we've got to take all the positives that we can from this. And as you say, make it for a much better life for all, really. I think that's the way I kind of look at it. So brilliant, Joe, that's terrific. I think that's covered everything. So thank you for your time today. So just quickly, join me next time when I talk to another HR director about their challenges ahead and the opportunities that will bring. Joe, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Peter.